The leak resulting from the disaster on the Deepwater Horizon created the most massive environmental disaster in our nation's history, killing wildlife, destroying critical wetlands and fisheries, and wreaking economic havoc in the Gulf of Mexico. 11 people died, and the cost to human health will probably not be known for years. Even more disturbing, the response to the spill, including the use of toxic dispersants, and the secrecy and dissembling by BP may have compounded the damage of the spill itself. On May 27th, the Judiciary Committee held a hearing on the legal liability issues surrounding the Gulf Coast oil disaster. At that hearing, the committee received testimony from victims, from the responsible companies, and from experts about the outdated and unfair maritime liability regime that is denying justice to the victims of this disaster. After the hearing, the distinguished chairman of the full committee and I introduced H.R. 5503, the Spill Act, to fix those laws so that the victims can be fairly compensated. The committee favorably reported the bill on June 23rd, and the bill passed the House on July 1st by voice vote. I hope the Spill Act will soon become law so that BP and the other corporations responsible for the Deepwater Horizon explosion and resulting oil spill will be held accountable under the law for all of the harm their reckless behavior has caused. Today, however, we turn our attention to ensuring justice for those trying to navigate the claims process set up by BP. The BP claims process so far has been plagued by problems, and many of those who have been harmed have not received adequate compensation in a timely fashion. Given the many problems with the BP claims process, it was very encouraging to hear on June 16th that the administration and BP had agreed to create the Gulf Coast Claims Facility, an independent claims process that will be administered by Ken Feinberg, our witness today. BP has promised that the new independent claims facility will be, quote, fairer, faster, and more transparent in paying damage claims by individuals and businesses, close quote. Mr. Feinberg has distinguished himself as the administrator of the Victims' Compensation Fund set up by Congress to aid the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Thanks to his good work, many of my constituents were able to avail themselves of an administrative process that was fair and expeditious. Mr. Feinberg is an excellent choice. Furthermore, the administration and BP announced that BP will establish a $20 billion escrow account, which will be funded over a 4-year period at the rate of $5 billion a year. They also announced that BP will contribute $100 million to a foundation to support unemployed oil rig workers. While these announcements sound promising, there remain troubling issues about the details of the escrow account, the Gulf Coast Claims Facility, and the claims process. Despite the fact that it has been over a month since the announcement of the $20 billion escrow account and the new claims facility, we have yet to see either the agreement setting up the escrow account or the final protocols that will be used to process claims. Among the concerns I have that I hope will be addressed at today's hearing are, to what extent will the escrow fund be bankruptcy remote, and what guarantee can we have that the fund pledge will also be protected from becoming a part of a bankruptcy estate should BP seek bankruptcy protection? Second, will the Gulf Coast Claims Facility recognize claims relating to use of dispersants, not of the original oil? Third, given that the long-term effect of the oil spill and use of dispersants could be at least a 10 or 20-year event, what provisions will be made for claimants who may, for example, seek compensation for economic loss, but whose medical conditions resulting from exposure may not become manifest for 5 or 10 or 20 years? Will claimants have to waive the opportunity to seek compensation for latent injuries from BP or from other parties in order to get initial damages for economic damages? Will injuries caused by dispersants be covered by the compensation fund? Will the Gulf Coast Claims Facility be willing to reopen resolved claims in the event that, for example, non-pecuniary damages under the Spill Act become available for the victims of the explosion and their families? As we pass the 3-month mark since this disaster began, the continuing efforts to stop the leak and clean the spill are paramount. But as the damage to natural resources, local economies, and daily lives continues to grow, we must be sure that the victims of this disaster can be made whole. As Mr. Feinberg certainly knows, perhaps better than anyone else, the full impact of a catastrophe of this magnitude may not become evident for many years, and it is likely that these cases will have to be revisited at some point in the future. I do not want to see the taxpayers on the hook for this damage, and I do not want to see people with serious but not yet evident injuries have their rights and legitimate claims nullified in the future. How will this process account for latent claims so that the injured will not be left high and dry or have to resort to the federal government to pay costs that rightly should be paid by BP? I am especially concerned because the information we have received from BP and quite frankly from some of the federal and state agencies charged with protecting the environment and public health, has not flowed as freely as the oil has flowed from this rupture. We now know that some of the information, such as the purported safety of the dispersants being used, was demonstrably false. It's deja vu all over again. A decade ago, less than a decade ago, EPA Administrator Christine Todd Whitman falsely assured the public that the air near Ground Zero was safe. We are still paying the price for that deception. Some people are paying with their lives. I hope today's hearing will guide the creation of an independent, fair, and transparent victim compensation program. I look forward to hearing from our witness today as he helps us understand these important issues. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.